23 Lime Racing and Farmer Motorsports could shut down if they lose their charters at the end of 2025, and Brendan McQueen is one of the drivers that is linked to the Kaulig Racing truck program. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and our Motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just share those really quickly. First, going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Dean Thompson's 2025 Beaver scheme that we'll see this weekend at Portland. I gotta say, this is one of the best looking paint schemes I've seen from the Sam Hunt Racing organization so far this year. It looks amazing. I think they knocked this one out of the park. The colors on it look incredible. Looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity race at Portland. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Will Brown's 2025 Mobile X scheme that we'll see this weekend at Portland. Very similar to the one he had in the NASCAR Cup Series race. There's some differences for sure, but I think this one looks really, really solid. I think that Kaulig did a good job. Looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Portland. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeff Burton and Blaine Perkins' 2025 Optico schemes that we'll see this weekend at Portland. Honestly, I think both schemes do look alright in my opinion. I like the colors on both of them overall. They do look pretty good. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack at Portland. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2025 Pinnacle scheme that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. Honestly, I think this game looks alright. Good to see Pinnacle sponsor Reddick. I think it's the first time the Pinnacle has sponsored Tyler Reddick in the Cup Series this year. The colors look alright. It'll be cool to see this car out on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hammer's 2025 Buddy Baker throwback scheme that we'll see this weekend in the truck race at Darlington. McAnally knocked this one out of the park. They did a really good job with the throwback theme they got for this weekend for the team. I think this one looks really good. I think McAnally did a great job on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Mozak's 2025 Kelly Wallace throwback that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. Very similar to Buddy Baker throwback. I really like the look of this truck. It looks great. I think did a really good job on the colors of it. It's fantastic and looks very similar to the one that Kenny Wallace had back in 1999. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2025 Pengu scheme that we'll see this weekend at Darlington for the Southern 500. Scheme looks okay in my opinion. Pretty cool to see Pengu coming in and sponsoring Ricky Stenhouse Jr. It does look okay, but it's not absolutely perfect. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Poole's 2025 Freedom Pro scheme that we'll see this weekend at Portland. I like the look of this car, in all honesty. I like the simplistic look to it, but I think the colors match pretty well on this, and I think they did a really good job on this one. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 A New Solution scheme that we'll see next weekend at Gateway. I really like the look of this car. It looks really solid, and it's pretty cool to see a new sponsor coming in, no pun intended, coming in to sponsor Ryan Ellis. It does look solid. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack next weekend at Gateway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jack Wood's 2025 Dick Trickle throwback that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. This absolutely looks great. It looks very similar to the White Lightning car that Dick Trickle had when he was racing late models and he was winning a lot of those races. It looks amazing. It looks phenomenal. I think McAnally did a really good job on this one. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Mason Maggio's 2025 Michael Waltrip throwback that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. This is one of the better ones we've seen for the truck series so far this year. It's very similar to one when Michael Waltrip drove the 99 car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series when it was a Busch Series at time from 2004, I believe. This one looks good. I think did a really solid job on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about top 5 finishes. As reported by the NASCAR Insights Count, I believe it was on Monday morning, that 32 drivers so far in the NASCAR Cup Series have scored a top 5 finish this year in Cup. That is the most through 26 races since 1973. Keep that in mind, that was 52 years ago. So it's been over half a century since the last time we've seen that many drivers score a top 5 finish. And remember back then, you still had a lot of opportunities to go out there and win. Yes, he did have less race at the time, but he still had a lot of competitive cars, even though there weren't as many competitive cars running the full season at that point. So very impressive to see that. Most drivers have scored a top 5 so far this season. We've seen some really strong racing this year in Cup at times. And I think it's impressive to see so many drivers score a top 5 finish in the NASCAR Cup Series so far in the 2025 year, and I really hope it continues into the future, something like that, because I love seeing all the competitive drivers and the competitive nature of the series currently at the moment, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Caleb Costner. As it was announced earlier today that Caleb Costner will drive the 74 for Kaulig Racing this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Darlington. Caleb Costner, who's a fixture of the ARCA series for the last half decade, and has been around in motorsports for quite some time. And Caleb Costner does have a little bit of talent for sure, who's shown some stuff in ARCA. Now, he did make his Craftsman Truck Series debut, I believe, at Richmond earlier this year, and had a decent run going, especially for the pace and speed of that truck. Realistically, he probably has a shot for a top 30, but the field is not that strong this year, so because there's only 32 trucks showing up, so you're not going to have an amazing amount of drivers competing. The team is trying to make the best they can with it. I think Caleb has a solid chance here to do very, very well, hopefully, though I don't think this truck will be up front. We'll see if we can do really, really well with the Kaulig Racing team and organization, but like I said, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. I think we'll have decent speed, probably not the best speed to contend. We'll see what Caleb Costner can do this weekend in the Truck Series race at Darlington. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle C. As it was confirmed earlier today by Joseph Sprigley that Kyle C will drive the number 53 for Joey Gase Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race this weekend at Portland. He's not going to be driving the number 28 car this week, and we'll talk about the driver who will be driving that car here in just a short little bit. Kyle C has kind of struggled on the road courses so far in 2025, and I don't believe this car is locked on the owner's points currently at the moment. I don't think anyone's going home, but I think that this car has not been really strong in the owner's points this year, and I think this car will be provided by Fords, and I have to think that RSS Racing is going to be helping out the Joey Gase Motorsports team in some way, shape, or form so Kyle can have the best run out there, but I expect Kyle to run near back of the pack most of the race because not only because I don't think Kyle's the best road course guy, but also Kyle C is going to be driving for a team that has really struggled so far in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year as that team looks to get a little bit stronger. We'll see what Kyle C can do, but like I said, I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. I think it'll be a little bit of struggle for him to be a factor in some way, shape, or form. We'll see if Kyle C can have a solid run with the Joey Gase Motorsports team this weekend at Portland in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Vicente Salas. As it was announced yesterday that Vicente Salas will drive the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Portland. This will be the second career start for Vicente. I think he ran earlier this year on an oval or road course, I'm pretty sure. I think he had a decent run on one of those races earlier this year. He's going to be driving for Alpha Prime Racing, an organization that has shown some decent speed on these types of tracks in the past, and we've known Alpha Prime can get the best out of good runs from time to time. We've seen Brendan Poole do well. But the road course program can also sometimes be very inconsistent, which is the one thing I'm a little worried about for Vicente, because Vicente is a very solid driver. He's ran some stuff in Craftsman trucks on road courses before. And I think that road course background is going to help him in a pretty big way for sure. I think he's got a solid opportunity here to run very, very well. I look for him to have some solid speed and some good pace potentially. I look for that car to have maybe a top 20, top 25 speed. There's some good competition though in the field, but I think Vicente can be someone who can step up to the plate and run really, really well. We'll see what he can do, and we'll see if he can have maybe a top 20 or top 25 this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Portland Raceway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Williams. As it was announced yesterday that Josh Williams will drive the number 91 for DGM Racing this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Portland. This is a reunion of some sorts. First, for many years, Josh Williams, I believe from like 2018 or 2019 up until around the 2021, 2022 to 2023 year, he drove basically his whole entire career with DGM Racing up to that point. And he had a lot of really strong and really great moments with that team. He contended for top 10s in points, had a lot of top 15s and top 20s very consistently with that program at times over the last couple of years. So it's really good to see Josh Williams going over with this program. Now, that being said, I do not believe Josh Williams is going to be a factor with this team at Portland because DGM Racing, while they do have a solid road course program, I will say, with other drivers, they've had like Preston Pardis over the years and Alex Abey as well. Josh is not the best road course guy out there, but they're probably going to do what they can to try to give him the best car so he can be solid and show some good speed. And I really hope he can have a good run this weekend because it'd be really cool to see this car up front. I'd love to see that car have a chance to get maybe a top 20. That'd be really soft for Josh. It's just really good to see that Josh Williams is back in the Xfinity Series once again, making more starts. I think Josh Williams is a very solid driver who can get some good runs with underfunded equipment. I know his time at Kaulig did not go very well for him, which was really, really disappointing to see, but he's got a really solid opportunity here. We'll see what he can do. He might be back with this program in 2026, but it's unknown at this point. Nonetheless, really good to see that he's got an opportunity to drive for a former team he drove for many years ago this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at Portland. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Milwaukee IndyCar ratings from this past weekend. As was reported by IndyCar on Fox's page, that IndyCar scored 779,000 viewers on Fox for the IndyCar race at Milwaukee. According to them and what Fox is reporting, that is up 6% from 2024. And I think last year had 735 to 736,000. That does go up a little bit. And keep in mind, I don't remember if that's the first day or the second day where that report came out. But honestly, to see that number up a little bit more than a lot of people expected, many people have been kind of expecting the average race number, average of people are going to be tuning in. I think it's around 720K, I'm pretty sure. So it did exceed the average a little bit more than we have seen. But we haven't seen a lot of IndyCar races kind of go in excess over 700,000 viewers this year outside of a couple events. But you look at this, that is a very solid rating for IndyCar. Now, do we want to see a million people watching IndyCar? Absolutely, because you look at the Xfinity Series, for example, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. The Xfinity Series is absolutely killing it when it comes to the ratings because they have consistency. But if you can build that IndyCar audience down the road, which I think there's a really good chance you could build that IndyCar audience with the drivers and the personalities you have in the sport and a promotion, I think Fox is going to be doing with them, really helping on the promotion side going forward. I really think there's a possibility that you could see the IndyCar ratings in the future grow because now you have a consistent home. When you keep changing channels, you don't have that consistent number of people who are able to tune in on a week-by-week basis. So this is what I'm really excited about with Fox and IndyCar's partnership going forward. Maybe not as much with NASCAR and Fox's coverage going forward, but I think that IndyCar's got a lot of positive things, and I think they have some momentum that could really help them finish off the year on a really strong note. We'll see if they can end the year off on a really strong note and see if they can have a really good rating for this weekend's race at Nashville, considering it'll be lead up to the race to take place at Darlington for Southern 500. We'll see if a lot of people tune into the event when we go there at Nashville this weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Biffle. As it was confirmed earlier today that Greg Biffle is back once again racing in ARCA West, as it was confirmed that Greg Biffle is going to drive the number 23 for Sigma Performance Services this weekend in the ARCA West race at Portland. This will be the second time that Greg Biffle has competed for the Sigma Performance Service organization. He ran for the team a couple weeks back, I believe up in Washington, I'm pretty sure, and also in Oregon as well. And Greg Biffle, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, had top five speed most of the night. He just didn't have a chance to go out there and compete for the win in the number 23 car because while that organization shown some really good speed over the years with people like Tyler Reif and even Tanner Reif, who I think has driven for this program in the past, this team is not one of the top level organizations out there. And we look at the strongest out there. McAnally Hogan Racing for many years has been the strongest team out there and has been one of the best teams ever to come across the sport, at least in the lower series. But I think Greg Biffle is going to have a decent opportunity. Now, there's some pretty good competition. You're going to have William Sawalch, who is running the ARCA West race this week. And I think there's some other Xfinity Series guys that are also going to be running in this event as well, which I think that is going to help those guys get that experience and get prepared when they do race there this weekend at Portland for the Xfinity race. But you've got a lot of really solid competition going out to the event. I think you're going to have a lot of good opportunities for some of these guys to run well. But I'm excited to see that Greg Biffle is coming back and racing once again, because the more we can see Greg Biffle out on the track, the better. Obviously, people love to see him race in the NASCAR Cup Series once again. Obviously, there's been a lot of unknown about him and NY Racing, whether NY Racing has paid him at this point, which is one of the reasons why we haven't seen him get behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup car, at least in the first place right now. So I think for him, it's disappointing to see he doesn't want to come back to NASCAR, but I also understand he's working with Cletus in a big way. We're going to talk about him near the end of this episode on the potential driver lineup for the Kaulig Truck program. But I think that Greg Biffle, absolutely, it's good to see him racing once again. We'll see if he can do very, very well this weekend at Portland. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Hand. As it was confirmed yesterday that Joey Hand will make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend at Portland Raceway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, driving a number 28 car for RSS Racing. We already talked about Kyle Sieg. Kyle Sieg will be running this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series event, but instead of being in the number 28, he will be behind the wheel of the number 53 car as he tries to make every single race so he can collect enough points to potentially have a shot to make the playoffs, so he will have to win Gateway if he wants to get that done. For Joey Hand, this is an amazing opportunity. This will be the first time that Joey has competed in NASCAR's top-level divisions, I believe, since 2023, if I'm not mistaken, when I believe the last time he ran was either the race at Circuit of the Americas for the Rick Ware team, or I think it was maybe a track like Indy, but I can't remember exactly a couple years back. But Joey Hand, we know, is a very well and very versatile road course racer. He can get the best out of equipment from time to time at underfunded stuff, and we know RSS Racing, while their program at the road courses has not been super strong and super amazing, I think if anyone can get into that equipment and run solid and run very, very well, it is certainly Joey Hand, who I think, especially with how close he's been with the Ford program, because he ran the Charlotte Roval a couple years ago in the NASCAR Cup Series, I think having that experience will help him in a really big way this weekend, because I think that equipment is honestly really, really solid. I think he will have a solid shot and a pretty good opportunity to maybe get himself a top 15. You got a lot of good competition. You got Will Brown running this weekend. You got Jack Perkins running this weekend. And you obviously got Connor Zilisch, who is the favorite to win this race. Even with the broken collarbone, he's still the favorite to win this weekend. So we'll see what Mr. Joey Hand can do. But I think he's got a solid chance and opportunity to be very solid and really, really competitive. I look for him to show some good speed. We'll see what he can do this weekend. And we'll see if Joey Hand can take that car up front this weekend in the Xfinity race at Portland. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona crash. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race on Saturday night, which many of you probably saw that race Saturday, you saw the incident that took place near the end of stage number 1. So coming down the front straightaway of the event with around 5 laps to go in stage 1, you had a conglomerate number of drivers in this group. You had Kyle Busch, you had Bubba Wallace, you had Joey Logano, and you had Kyle Larson in this pack as well. Coming down the front straightaway, Kyle Larson is giving a little bit of a push to Bubba Wallace. Bubba was also crowding down Joey Logano and was also crowding down Kyle Busch as well. Once Larson gave a little bit of push to him and Bubba started crowding down, it would create a massive crash and a ton of cars would get collected, including Austin Cindric, Alex Bowman, who would be sitting the rest of the night worrying if he was going to make the playoffs or not, Riley Herbst, who was Bubba's teammate, got collected in the crash, and many other drivers in the field got caught up in the crash and incident, including Austin Hill, who was making one of his few Cup Series starts in this season. Now, a lot of people initially blamed Kyle Larson. I thought Larson was mainly the one at fault for it, but Denny Hamlin, even Freddie Kraft as well, are not blaming Kyle Larson mostly for this. Denny Hamlin, who is the co-owner of the 23 car for 2311, Denny Hamlin actually blames Bubba Wallace for the crash that took place on the racetrack. I find that to be very, very interesting because when I look back at it more and more and see the replays, again, I initially thought Kyle Larson was absolutely at fault for the wreck, but when you look at the situation, yeah, Larson's definitely giving a ton of bumps, but he was definitely going straight. He wasn't completely all over the place pushing Bubba Wallace. And Bubba Wallace was crowding down Joey Logano and Kyle Busch and everyone else there, and that's what really caused the pileup. To me, I think it's just a racing deal mostly. I get Bubba's probably going to take the blame. Even Bubba himself was taking the blame for incident on the racetrack, even though he said he hadn't seen the replay at that point. But to me, I think that is multiple drivers' fault, and when it's multiple drivers at fault for the incident, you call that a racing deal. I think that's more of a racing deal than anything else at this point, to be honest. And I get that people instantly want to blame Bubba for incidents, and I don't think Bubba deserves to get as much hate as he gets, but I think at the same token, at the same time, if he is the one who's responsible for the wreck, we're going to blame Bubba on that situation just for that race situation there. But to me, I can't say it's all on Bubba. I think there's multiple drivers that were involved in the incident there that I think should take some responsibility for the crash that took place there. I don't think it's just one driver that's at fault. I think there's multiple drivers that should take some responsibility for that crash, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona Xfinity ratings from this past weekend. And honestly, they're really, really good. As it was initially reported by Jeff Gluck and then reported by the Xfinity Series group as well, CW group as well for Xfinity coverage, they report that CW scored 1.092 million viewers at Daytona International Speedway. That is up 33% from 2024. I believe last year the race got around 700,000 viewers for the event, and I think the race did not get rain delayed either last year. You have the race on the CW once again, and there's only been a few races so far in 2025 that have gone under a million. I think only 2 or 3 races altogether in around the 24-25 Xfinity races that have been branded so far this year. Almost all of them have been able to have every race with over 1 million viewers, which is absolutely impressive. And I think a big reason for that, there's 2 big reasons. Number one, the racing product in the Xfinity Series this year has been absolutely incredible, and it's been phenomenal throughout the year in majority of the events. The other reason, consistency. You look at the Cup Series, for example. They're changing channels seems like every single week or every other week at this point, and you're not having the consistency with the Cup Series at this point. You compare that to the Xfinity Series and eventually the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. You've got multiple opportunities to watch drivers race, but you also are on the same consistent channel every time. And if you have consistency for people to know where they're going, that's going to really help your sport grow overall. I think for Xfinity, that's something that I think is really exciting because the more consistency you have, the better it's going to be for everybody watching. So I'm glad to see that we're getting consistent numbers for that. I think it's good to see the Xfinity numbers continue to go up. We're having a majority race over 1 million, which is really, really exciting. And I think that's going to continue into the future where you're going to see more and more of those races go over 1 million into the future. So we'll see what happens for the long term, but I think it's really good to see that the Xfinity Series had some really solid numbers, and good to see the CW do a really good job with the ratings for this weekend at Daytona, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. With Shane Van Gisbergen scoring 4 wins in the NASCAR Cup Series to be the only driver and the only rookie to make the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs this year, he has won the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year award, meaning that he will be the first foreign-born driver to win the Rookie of the Year honors since Juan Pablo Montoya back in 2007. And he's also the first rookie to make the NASCAR Cup Series Plus, I believe, since 2022 when Austin Cindric made it. And remember, he won a race to get in there. Then you think back to a couple years ago, I don't think Chase Briscoe got in as a rookie. William Byron, I also don't believe got in. I think Byron did not get in as a rookie either in 2018. I think the last time maybe you had a rookie get in was Chase Elliott, I'm pretty sure, back in 2016 prior to that. And then Cole Costner in 2020 got in based off of a win. But for Shane Van Gisbergen, it has been a very solid season, at least on the road courses this year. And he's been starting to improve a lot on the road courses too. Say what you want to say about SVG. He has back-to-back top 20s going to this weekend's race at Darlington, and his numbers at Darlington in both series and Cup in the Xfinity Series have actually been really good. He ran top 10 in the second race at Darlington for Xfinity, and in the race earlier this year for the race happened in the spring at Darlington. He ran inside the top 20 a lot of that race and finished in a 20th place, I believe, at the end of the day. So I think that he's only going to get better as time progresses and goes on, but I think for him it's very impressive to see him go out there and win the Rookie of the Year honors. Congratulations to Shane Van Gisbergen on being your 2025 Cup Rookie of the Year. He's earned it, in my opinion, did a really good job this year. Been way better than Riley Herbst. Even if he didn't get wins, he's been better than Herbst without question this year. Congrats to him on winning the Rookie of the Year honors for the Cup Series in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar once again. As it was announced earlier today, in big news in the gaming world, it was announced that IndyCar will produce a new game in 2026 that iRacing will be the ones that are heavily producing on. It'll be available in 2026 on Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5, Steam, and the Steam Deck as well. And Scott McLaughlin will be the driver that will be heavily involved with this game, and I would also expect that Scott McLaughlin will be likely the cover driver for this game when it does end up releasing. Some things to note about the game, I believe Orentos is going to be helping make the game engine, but iRacing and IndyCar are going to be building their own engine platform to be built, and some of the people that are helping, I believe, with the NASCAR game as well are going to be helping them produce this IndyCar game for 2026. This is really, really exciting because we all know how much hype there is around NASCAR 25 currently at the moment. And iRacing producing this game is a big deal. You go back to a couple years ago when you had the fallout between iRacing and IndyCar initially when Motorsports Games was around. There was supposed to be a game that was supposed to come out under the Motorsports Games umbrella, but that, of course, unfortunately fell through. And I think that this partnership coming back together is a really, really big deal. And I think IndyCar has a ton of potential here to make a really solid and really good product. And I think you're actually potentially going to have a good game coming out here at this point because iRacing's producing it. It has been over 20 years since he had a IndyCar game come out. I think the last time was 2004 and was based on the 2003 season. So it's been over 20 years since the last game ended up being released. So we've been due for a game for quite some time. And I think it's a massive deal to see that we're finally going to be getting a game for a first time in many, many years. It's really exciting stuff, and this is just a huge day for IndyCar in general. There's a lot of things they're doing that I think are positive currently at the moment, and I think this is one of those positive things that they should be really celebrating and be happy about. Congratulations, IndyCar, on finally having their first IndyCar game in quite some time. I think it's also going to be a really good game that I think is going to come out this year, or next year, I should say. I think it's going to be a really good game overall for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cadillac Formula 1. As it was officially announced and confirmed earlier today that the 2026 Formula 1 lineup for Cadillac has been officially announced and unveiled. As the two drivers for the team are going to be veteran drivers. It's going to be Sergio Perez, who will drive the number 11, and Valtteri Bottas, who are going to drive the number 77. These two have been the front runners for this ride throughout the whole entire year so far. There's been changes where they were saying maybe a young driver like Jack Crawford could come in. There was talk about Mick Schumacher potentially being a candidate for this team. But it's been officially confirmed that these two guys are going to be your drivers. I got to say these two are really good choices for this team because you're going to have two drivers who have won race in Formula 1 and two drivers who have competed for championships in Formula 1 over the course of the last decade or so, getting a chance and an opportunity to be with the new Cadillac program. And I think that this is going to be a really strong foundation going into 2026 because Sergio's won quite a few races in Formula 1 when he drove for Red Bull, and there were some unknowns about the whole situation, how things kind of ended at Red Bull, unfortunately. But I think that this is a fantastic move to bring Sergio in. And Valtteri Bottas is the first guy that I thought of being a candidate for this team right from the get-go. Valtteri is an amazing driver. He, of course, I believe is a reserve driver for Mercedes currently at the moment. And I think that he is absolutely a really, really talented guy who can get the best out of equipment in IndyCar right now. And I think he's going to do absolutely an amazing and fantastic job with this team going into 2026. Now, obviously, there's probably going to be some growing pains with this team and organization going into next year, but I think this team is up for the challenge, and I think they're going to be able to deliver with that challenge going into next year. And I think this is just a strong lineup for next season for the Cadillac program. I look forward to seeing these guys have a ton of success going into next year, and I think that you're going to have an opportunity to see both these guys do very, very well. Again, it would not surprise nor shock me if you see this team just have an unbelievable run in 2026 in Formula 1. There was talk about maybe down the road Valtteri coming over racing IndyCar in the future, maybe run the Indy 500, but I think both these guys have had some success. I think they're both going to be solid. I think they're both going to do pretty well this time around and when we get to Formula 1 next season. A really exciting driver lineup for the program going into 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona Cup TV ratings from this past weekend. And honestly, they're very interesting. As was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that NBC got a 1.76 rating and 3.297 million viewers for Saturday night's race at Daytona. That is off from 1.95 and 3.5 million from 2024, being down about 0.2 of a rating and being down about 200,000 viewers from the 2024 season. That doesn't look good on paper, right? Well, there are a couple things to kind of look at. Number one, Saturday night races are definitely losing a lot of the ratings department. Look at how the race at Atlanta went when it came to the ratings. And look at the Richmond ratings, for example. You only have 1.4 million people that tune into the Richmond race, which is the lowest watched Cup Series race in over 30 years. And then the Atlanta race was down from 2024 in particular. Saturday nights just don't do as well as they used to be. But you're probably never going to see the Coke Zero Sugar Corner ever go off of a Saturday night. But there also were a lot of blackouts as well. It's another thing to kind of look at because certain areas were not blackouts, but there were preseason games going on, and a lot of those, especially in the area of Florida where Daytona is, they had to be moved over to the CW instead of NBC, which also affected the ratings being down a little bit. I think the ratings have absolutely been similar. I think they definitely would have been for sure. But I think because of what happened to CW, and I don't think they translated those from the CW from this year, onto the network there, which again is disappointing to see, but it again is not shocking and surprising to see also. But I think the ratings are not awful by any stretch of the imagination. Do you want to see those ratings up? But I think this year at times it's been good, and there's also been some times where it's been very, very bleak at this point. And I think there's definitely some concerns for sure when you look at the ratings department currently at the moment on the NASCAR Cup Series side. But I gotta say, it's not the worst I've ever seen before. There's some positives when you look at it. At least it's not down over like 500,000 or anything like that. You wish the number again was a little bit higher, but at the same token, at the same time, it's not the worst you've ever seen at this point. I hope that number continues to increase going forward in the future. I think it's a not awful number. Is it a great number? No, but I don't think it's the worst number that we have seen for a NASCAR Cup Series race at Daytona. I think it's actually a decent number, but not an amazing number overall for the ratings department. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Palou. Now, Alex Palou has obviously been dominant IndyCar over the course of the last half-decade and has won 4 of the last 5 championships in IndyCar. And many people have been expecting that Alex Palou was going to return to Chip Ganassi Racing in 2026. However, there was a rumor that began to surface a couple days ago about Alex Palou potentially being a candidate for the second Red Bull seat going into 2026 and replacing Yuki Tsunoda in that car going into the 2026 year. Obviously, we know that Red Bull will not be at the Honda program in 2026, and Yuki is very closely aligned with Honda, so Yuki may end up over at a team like Aston Martin going into the future, though both drivers at Aston Martin are set for 2026. But with that, they're trying to find a second driver that might be able to replace. Now, some bring up Liam Lawson, but Liam kind of struggled with there. So they're talking about Alex Palou being a candidate. Now, Chip Ganassi has come out and denied this rumor and says it's not true in any way, shape, or form. He also said that Nathan Brown's report was clickbait, which I'll be real and honest. I can't say that that was completely clickbait because it wasn't Nathan Brown who was the one who started this rumor. It was multiple other reporters out there in Europe that said this, but there's been reports out there that one of Alex Palou's agents is the one behind it, and Chip Ganassi has now denied the rumor. Let's say if this does end up coming true where Alex Palou does leave to go to Formula 1. I don't think it'll be as amazing in Formula 1. Do I think it'll be better than Yuki Tsunoda 100%? And I think we'll have a better chance to be up front competing for wins compared to other drivers who've driven a second car in Formula 1 for Red Bull at this point. But I think if I had the opportunity to stay in and be an IndyCar, I would take the chance to continue being IndyCar because I think that's the best opportunity I have for my career at this point. So we'll see what happens going into the future on that front. I absolutely would love to see Alex Palou. It would be cool to see him maybe go to Formula 1 in the future, but he has to be in a good car if he's going to have that opportunity. And I just don't know right now if going to Red Bull is the best option. You want to continue racing for a team like Chip Ganassi Racing, who's been absolutely dynamite over the last half-decade. They've become a better team than Penske. And, you know, there's not really a better option. I know, obviously, there's rumors about Dennis Hauger trying to find a seat at this point. There's talk about him going to AJ Ford or Juncos at this point. We'll have to kind of wait and see what happens there. Nonetheless, I'm very interested to see what happens with Alex Palou at this point. I think he'll stay with Chip Ganassi, but you never know. Things can change very quickly. We'll see if he does, in fact, stay with Chip Ganassi Racing going forward in the future and doesn't leave the team in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chip Ganassi Racing once again. Now, during the same press conference where Chip Ganassi came out and basically dismissed the rumor about Alex Palou going to Red Bull, Matt Weaver from Motorsports.com and other journalist outlets out there spoke about Chip Ganassi Racing and maybe getting back involved in NASCAR in the future. There's obviously been a lot of unknowns around the Honda program currently at the moment. As stated this week, they're not sure if they're going to be staying in IndyCar past 2026 as their contract ends at the end of the 2026 year. And they're having rumors about Honda potentially jumping over to NASCAR as early as the 2027 season and potentially becoming a 5th manufacturer in the NASCAR Cup Series, with Dodge potentially having a Cup Series program in 2027 for the Kaulig Racing team. Now, Chip Ganassi was asked about maybe coming back to NASCAR in the future. Well, Chip Ganassi did say never at this point. Does he say it's very likely at the moment? He's not really sure at this point and says at this moment probably not right now, but you never know. Things can change very, very quickly. Chip Ganassi Racing obviously had a ton of success in NASCAR, not as strong as they were in IMSA, not as strong as they've been in IndyCar for many, many years. But they still had a lot of success. They came in with a Dodge program in 2001, and Sterling Marlin got a bunch of wins for the program near the end of the season. And in 2002, Sterling Marlin was competing for a championship, and they brought in drivers like Jamie McMurray and Kyle Larson over the years. And I think the team like Chip Ganassi coming back, they sold off their program to the Trackhouse Racing team. I think it'd be really cool to see Chip Ganassi come in with the Honda program in the future. Do I think that's 1,000,000% likely? I'm not sure at this point right now. But I think it'd be really good for them to come over and race in NASCAR Cup competition again in the future. I think it'd be great for the sport if something like that could, in fact, happen. Do I think it's going to really happen? Who knows at this point? But the fact that he said never say never tells me there might be some truth to them maybe down the road coming in. I'd love to see a team like Chip Ganassi once again show up. I think it'd be awesome for the sport if that could happen. We'll see if that does, in fact, end up happening in the future where they come over and race in the sport down the road. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if here very, very soon if there is a chance for a team like Chip Ganassi Racing to show up and race in NASCAR once again. So they had a lot of success for many years. We'll see if that happens in the not-so-distant future where a team like Ganassi could show up maybe with the Honda program if they do, in fact, end up coming over to NASCAR in the future. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spec Racing. Now, on the most recent Actions Detrimental that got released on Sunday on Dirty Mo Media, Denny Hamlin talked about a rumor that he has heard in regards to Spec Racing in the lower series going forward. Where Denny Hamlin says a rumor going around is that the Truck Series will become Spec by 2028, while the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, which will be the entire sponsor for the secondary series in 2026, will soon follow in the not-so-distant future. Now, the year was not specified, but I would have to think the earliest you might see the secondary series come in is when the media deal comes up, which is like 2030 or 2031. But this doesn't surprise me or shock me. I mean, you kind of see Spec Racing in the Craftsman Truck Series currently at the moment. You see that where all the engines are basically the same engines with the engines they use there. Basically, the more engines they've been using for quite some time, which Penske has had development in those engines for years, by the way. There's been rumors of other things happening as well. And apparently, there's going to be some body changes coming to the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026 to make things a little bit easier. And there's a lot of spec parts currently at the moment. But when you hear the thing about Spec Racing, you do get concerned. Now, can Spec Racing be good? I think it can be good from time to time if it's done correctly. The problem is when it comes to NASCAR and Spec Racing, I don't think the racing itself has been absolutely spectacular when you look at the Spec Racing side of things. And that's not something I think a lot of fans want. They want the racing to be amazing and really, really good. They don't want it to be boring. And I think that the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series going into next year, you got a really solid group over there. You have a lot of good cars out there. And the racing quality in the second and third series in particular, I'll say this except the last couple weeks, but I think they've really outrun NASCAR when it comes to the racing product. Maybe the coverage isn't as good, but you have really, really good racing in the lower series currently at the moment. You compare that to the NASCAR Cup Series at this point, where I'll be honest, I don't think the racing has been amazing in Cup, and a lot of that is the Spec Racing side of things. And I worry that if we do go to the spec side of things, that the racing quality is really, really going to suffer, and then it's not going to be really fun to watch. And I think then there's going to be a lot of uncertainty around the sport at that point, because, again, if you go toward that, you're going to have a lot of angry fans and a lot of upset fans, and I don't think you want to make a lot of fans upset, because a lot of fans don't want to see spec racing. They want to see innovation. That's one of the reasons why IMSA hasn't gotten a lot more popular. Look at their YouTube channel. Look at the number of people watching IMSA races. That has gone up in recent years. And I think that if you do go to the spec racing side of things, you're going to have an increase in that, where you're going to have less people that are going to want to tune in, and you're going to have more people going to other things like the Cars Tour in the future and going to different forms of racing to watch at this point. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens there in the future and see if spec racing does become a big thing. But I think there is a chance and possibly that's going to get bigger, bigger, and bigger. I really hope it doesn't, because I'm not a fan of spec racing and motorsports in general. But I think there's a really good chance, and it's certainly a possibility that something like that could happen in the future, where spec racing becomes a bigger thing, which I'm not a fan that it might become a thing in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the Craftsman Truck Series in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking a little bit of silly season, we're going to talk a little bit about Joe Gibbs Racing's NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts program heading into the 2026 year. Now, obviously, there's been some talk about certain drivers that could move up to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year in 2026, and there's been no official confirmations on how many cars are going to be out there next year. Now, the Daily Downforce put out 2 reports in regards to 2026 currently at the moment. Let's begin by talking about Williams Walsh. According to what they have reported, Williams Walsh, it sounds like more than likely is going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year in 2026. They feel that Williams Walsh has shown improvement, and Williams Walsh, the other big thing to look at is he does bring sponsorship and funding to the table, which is one of the reasons more than likely why he is going to end up staying with the program going into 2026. The other driver that we'll talk about is Taylor Gray. They published earlier today that Taylor Gray, there's a lot of uncertainty about him returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in the O'Reilly Series next year, and there's been a new rumor that surfaced about him potentially going over to a third Farmer Motorsports truck in 2026. It is expected that Lane Riggs and Chandler Smith are going to retain their same rides in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year. You're going to have Lane Riggs who more than likely drive the 34 once again, while you have Chandler Smith who will drive the number 38 truck once again in the 2026 season. I think Taylor Gray leaving Joe Gibbs Racing would absolutely be really disappointing because I think he's actually been really, really good with the Joe Gibbs Racing program so far in 2025, and he's had some good speed at times throughout the 2025 season. And he also brings sponsorship and funding to the table. This would be the first time that Taylor Gray would be away from Toyota or be away from the family in some way, shape, or form. But Johnny Gray would probably also pay a little bit to make sure he had a seat and a ride. But I'll be honest, if I had to choose between William Walsh and Taylor Gray, I'm going to go with Taylor Gray, even though I think William has shown improvement. So who could be the replacement for Taylor Gray? Look no further than Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz has been heavily linked to be going to the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year. Once he does, in fact, end up turning 18 years old, he'll turn 18 in early March. I think his first race will be either around Las Vegas or sometime a little bit earlier in the year, maybe around when we get to like Coda or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But he does turn 18 in March. And once he turns 18, he can run full-time in the series at that point. So I think there is certainly a possibility there that you may end up seeing Taylor Gray move down the trucks. And I think he'd have a really strong lineup if they end up having 3 trucks. We also don't know what the future holds currently at the moment for the front row team at this point because of the lawsuit going on right now. So I think that's a big story to watch coming up here really soon as well. So we'll see what happens on that front in the future. But right now there's some drivers that could be on the move for the lower series going forward in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, earlier this week, Daniel Suarez went on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio and I believe talked to Mike Bagley and Pete Pistone about his 2026 plans. Well, he has nothing officially to announce at this moment for the 2026 season. He does say that he's getting more excited about his future and he's hoping to have an official announcement and confirmation, likes where things are headed currently at the moment for the 2026 season and where he might be racing next year. Now, we all know that that Daniel Suarez, of course, will not be returning to Trackhouse Racing in the 2026 season. We obviously know that Connors Ultra was confirmed earlier this week that he'll take over the 3rd full-time Trackhouse Racing seat next year and be teammates with of course, Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. This means that Daniel Suarez will be the odd man out of the program going into next year, and there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty on where he is truly going to end up in the 2026 season. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of really good Cup Series opportunities at this point, and Legacy Motor Club, there were rumors about him maybe being a candidate for the Legacy Motor Club team if they do get their 3rd charter for next year, but it does not sound like that is going to be a possibility currently at the moment for next season. So, the only opportunity we probably see him and maybe being in Cup next year is maybe with Spire Motorsports in the number 7 car. There's been a lot of talk about Justin Haley potentially getting replaced at the end of this year and maybe not even finishing the season with the program, which, again, I think more than likely, especially with how well Justin Haley's run at the end of this regular season despite not making the playoffs, I don't see Justin Haley losing his seat before the end of the year. So then you have to think for Suarez, though, do you go and take over the 7 car next year and you get rid of Justin Haley? And is Suarez really an upgrade over Haley? Well, yes, Daniel Suarez had 3 consecutive top 10 finishes, which is going to help him a little bit going into next year right now. I don't know if Suarez is really an upgrade over Justin Haley at this point. And I feel like for Justin Haley, he deserves another opportunity to be in the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, if he struggles at the end of next year, then maybe make some moves. Obviously, Kyle Busch is going to be a free agent at the end of next year. And there's talk about him going to Spire and Cup for the last couple of years. Of course, he's got a contract with RCR through next season as they exercise that option season. But I really don't see that this team being a full option for Suarez currently at the moment. So if it's not going to be Cup, what about the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series? There are going to be some rides available. Some are going to mention Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't think Joe Gibbs Racing is an option anymore. I think the best option in Xfinity or O'Reilly is going to be Junior Motorsports. Junior Motorsports is a team that many people have linked them over to over the course of the last couple months. I've also linked them over to that number 88 card for next year. This is the one that makes the most sense to me because number one, Junior Motorsports, there's even a chance and possibly that you might get the opportunity to maybe even make some cut starts with Junior Motorsports because I think this team either could have a full-time cup program next year or could at least be part-time next season in general. And I think that Daniel Suarez would be a really good driver for this. Plus, you're basically doing a driver swap because you got Zilich going up Cup with Trackhouse, and then you have Suarez going down to the 88 car. And I think that it would make a lot of sense for Daniel Suarez to drive his number 88 car next year. I get that it'll be his choice on what ride he exactly wants to run, but I just think to me it makes the most sense right now for Suarez to go to JRM. And I know people are going to mention Kaulig Racing and Xfinity or O'Reilly next year. I'm not sure how many rides are going to be available at Kaulig next year because of how much focus they're going to have on trucks going into next year at the moment. So I think that there's a chance he can go truck racing. I think the best landing spot for Daniel Suarez is going to be the JRM program. I think that's going to be the best option right now. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Suarez. And again, I would expect an announcement of that in the coming weeks. Probably by the end of September, more than likely, we'll get some sort of official announcement or confirmation on what exactly is going on with Suarez going for the 2026 year. We'll just have to wait and see on that front. But as of now, I'm leaning toward him heading over to a team like Junior Motorsports next year. We'll see if he does end up going over there. We'll see if that does end up getting confirmed here soon for the 2026 year on what Daniel Suarez's future is going to look like in the not-so-distant future. I think he ends up at JRM, though. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about the Kaulig Truck Series program for 2026. So it obviously was confirmed over the weekend that Kaulig Racing will officially be the Truck Series team for 2026 with the Ram program. And they're going to be the only Truck Series team that will be under the Ram umbrella for 2026. It was also confirmed as well they're going to have 5 Craftsman Truck Series rides out there available. And it sounds like it might be first come, first serve, but there's also going to be some sort of gong show going into this. But we haven't really heard of any official names for the Truck Series program currently at the moment. At the announcement that was announced on Saturday, there were no names officially mentioned for the program for next year. But they mentioned on Door Bumper Clear 2 potential drivers who could be candidates for the program going into 2026. One of them, which is not shocking and surprising, is Daniel Dye. Daniel Dye has not signed a contract extension to continue racing in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2026. And Daniel Dye, especially with the announcement being at Randy Dye, which is Daniel Dye's father's dealership, this would absolutely make the most sense to me of him going down and running in the Craftsman Truck Series. I think Daniel Dye also had a lot more success in the Truck Series the last year or so when he ran there full-time with McAnally than he has had his first year with Kaulig. And I get he's had some decent runs with this team, but I think going down to the lower series would absolutely make a ton of sense at this point. The other driver, though, that's been heavily linked to this program for next year is Brendan Butterbean Queen. They mentioned his name is a potential candidate for this. Now, what's interesting, I had heard a rumor about Brendan Butterbean Queen moving up to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series like 2 months ago, I'm pretty sure, of him maybe going to a team like Spire Motorsports potentially. But we do know the Spire Motorsports, and what rumors have been speculating is that Spire Motorsports may be selling off some of their Truck Series equipment and giving it to Kaulig Racing. Could Brendan be part of that package deal for next year? That I'm not sure of, but I don't believe Brendan has an entitlement contract deal with Chevrolet at the moment. I think he's free to drive whatever ride he wants to because he's driven Toyotas and he's driven Chevrolets as well. So I would think that he would be someone that absolutely would be an option and available. And I think Brennan has absolutely been doing an amazing job in the ARCA series this year. He's been dominating. He's leading the point standings by quite a bit over LeVar, Scott, and Lawless Allen. I think he's won like 5 or 6 races this year and is very likely going to win the ARCA championship this season. If you're looking for someone that can really start your program up and help a program get really up to speed very, very quickly, I think someone like Brendan Butterbean Queen would be a really, really great option for this program. So his name continues to be linked. Those are 2 names we know for sure that are very much linked to this program for next year. What other drivers could potentially be linked to this program? Because if you're going to go after drivers that aren't part of the Chevrolet camp, or the Toyota camp, or the Ford camp for that matter, you surely look at some interesting names. Some I've seen mention Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie would certainly be interesting, but from what I understand, he is a reserve driver for Brad Keselowski currently at the moment. So not only does he have a contract with Ford, but he also has a contract with Spire Motorsports as well. Would he be willing to leave the Spire or the Ford camp going forward and switch over and run with Dodge? Does he want to run the truck series full time? I know he's been having some decent runs in trucks, and he's had a couple top 5s and top 10s. But I'm not sure if Corey LaJoie wants to do that at this point and switch allegiance over to the Ram program next season. One name that I haven't seen many people talk about, though, is Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt doesn't have a full-time ride currently at the moment right now. Brett Moffitt, in my opinion, is someone who's extremely underrated. He won a Truck Series championship with Hattori Racing back in 2018. And most years in the Craftsman Truck Series, he ended up winning races. He won in 2016 with Red Horse Racing. He won with a lot of organizations. He's taken underfunded teams and run very, very well. And Brett Moffitt, unlike most drivers, does not have a contract with a manufacturer currently at the moment right now. I think he would absolutely make the most sense to me to be one of those full-time drivers. If you want someone who is going to give you a really good chance and opportunity to win a championship really, really quickly, why not go for Brett Moffitt? That would be a really good person I'd like to see get a full-time opportunity. I have heard that he's been difficult to work with other people, but I think that he would be someone I'd be willing to put that aside and get my program up and running. Some other names that I've heard people mention, Cletus McFarland. I actually think Cletus will run some select truck races next year with this program potentially, but I don't think he has the opportunity to go full-time currently at the moment. So I do think he's going to potentially be a part-time guy next year, but I don't think he'll be a full-time guy in 2026 at this point. Maybe people will mention Kaylee Bryson. I don't think she's got a contract with the manufacturer, but I'm not sure about her. LeVar Scott's a name that I've seen people talk about. LeVar, I don't know if he's got a contract with Chevrolet. One name I'll mention is Kyle Weatherman. Kyle Weatherman doesn't have a ride currently at the moment right now for this year. I think Kyle absolutely should be racing in NASCAR currently at the moment. It blows my mind that someone who's as good as Kyle Weatherman isn't going to get the chance and opportunity maybe to race for any program next year, which is extremely disappointing. The fact that he got replaced, and I like Ryan Ellis a lot, but Kyle's a better driver than Ryan Ellis personally. Even though Ryan's done a lot of great things in the sport, I certainly would take a guy like Kyle Weatherman over Ryan Ellis at the moment for a full-time seat. But again, sponsorship funding brings a lot. But I think, to me, I like to see someone like him get an opportunity with Ram and race in the lower series. Outside of that, some mention Caden Honeycutt. Caden's got to deal with Toyota next year, so that's not possible. Some mention I've seen people mention Matt Crafton. Maybe, but he might run part-time with ThorSport next year. Who knows at this point? But I think it'll be very interesting to see who ends up going to that program for 2026 and what drivers end up going to the Kaulig Truck Series program in 2026 as well. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit once again. Now, to catch you guys up on what's been going on with this lawsuit, 2311 in Front Row sued NASCAR back in October of last year on antitrust claims. Then 2311 Front Row filed for a preliminary injunction as they did not sign the charter agreement to have a charter for the 2025 season. Judge Kenneth Bell granted that charter for the 2025 year initially. NASCAR, as expected, appealed that preliminary injunction. They had the hearing, I believe, in May, and they actually ended up winning their preliminary injunction, that being NASCAR, or winning the appeal to the preliminary injunction, and 2311 Front Row lost their charters at that point, and they could sue them. Now, sell those charters, not sell them, but basically could lose those charters, and NASCAR could take control back. They actually attempted to appeal them, and they didn't get a chance to appeal them. Recently, they tried to file for another run at preliminary injunction, and that hearing is coming up very soon on Thursday, in fact, tomorrow, when many of you are watching this video. Now, according to what's now been reported in recent days, it is getting very spicy currently at the moment. According to what Bob Cox and others have reported, NASCAR is planning to issue a charter that 25 and Front Row Motorsports owns to an organization not named in the documents that they have received. Now, one thing that does need to be clarified at this point, it is not one of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters. The charters I believe that Zane Smith has currently at the moment right now, and the charter that is being used by Riley Herbst at this point. Remember, two of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters, when Stewart-Haas Racing shut their program down, two of the three remaining SHR charters went to Front Row and 25 Racing. The other one, of course, went to Trackhouse Racing for Sheen and Gisbergen for this year. I believe, but basically that they want to sell that charter to an organization at the moment. Now, 25 Front Row have also responded to this situation, and they have actually pretty much confirmed, and they've said this now, but if they don't get to keep their charters, and the decision is made in the coming weeks, if they're not able to keep their charters for 2026 and keep their charters for the remainder of the year, they may have to shut down effective immediately at the end of the 2025 season. According to what Jennifer had reported before, she also deleted the tweet that she put out as well. Apparently, Tyler Reddick has filed a breach of contract clause, and basically it says, I need to have a charter for 2025 and for 2026. Otherwise, I can leave this team and walk effective immediately. Now, obviously, there is a lot of people that are very interested in picking up a guy like Tyler Reddick for the 2025-6 season, and a lot of teams that have to be willing to move bounds to get someone like Tyler Reddick currently at the moment for that year. Now, again, the decision on the ruling for the preliminary injunction will not be made to Thursday. But going back to the thing of shutting down, that absolutely is really, really massive. And that would basically be suffering irreparable harm. NASCAR, it's not shocking and surprising, though. They want to move on trying to sell all these charters to organizations as quickly as possible. Before talking about the uncertainty of 25 Front Row, however, let's talk about the team that might get this charter. There's been a lot of speculation on who could perhaps pick up this charter for the 2026 year. There's a lot of people that think it could be Legacy Motor Club. Legacy is looking to have a third charter for next year. There's been rumors of them maybe purchasing the Haas factory team or merging with the Haas factory team and taking that program for next year, at least their Cup Series program for 2026. Maybe keeping the Xfinity program in the Ford camp, but keeping their Cup Series program with Toyota in the future. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to get that charter from NASCAR because of their own legal battle with Rick Ware at this point. Some mention RCR. Maybe, but is RCR willing to have a third full-time car and be super competitive? To be honest, I really don't know if they're ready or qualified enough to have a third competitive car unless you get a good enough driver behind the wheel like a Tyler Reddick who's probably never going to go back to RCR. Someone mentioned a team like Live Fast Motorsports. BJ McLeod has expressed interest once again on getting a charter for next year. He would love to have an opportunity. Could we see him maybe partner up with a person like Dale Jr. potentially? That is certainly interesting to watch. RFK, they need a third charter currently at the moment with them being kind of involved in a litigation. No, they're not fully involved with it. They're kind of having to be involved in some way, shape, or form with the other lawsuit going on between Rick Ware and Legacy Motor Club at this point. You've got other teams that have kind of expressed interest in wanting to get a third charter, extra charter at this point. And again, Penske's not going to get one. Front Row's not going to get one because of their lawsuit right now. But I'm interested to see who it could be. Now, I think it's Dale Jr. and Junior Motorsports personally. I think that's who makes the most sense to me at the moment right now. Junior has expressed interest, even said in the document over the years of someone who's expressed the interest of getting one. They're basically going to get that charter for free at this point. And Dale Jr. has talked about the cost of those charters. And I think NASCAR is willing to try to change the public court of opinion, the court of public opinion, to try to get people to be on their side. And if you get Dale Jr. to get a charter from NASCAR pretty much almost for free at this point, a lot of people are going to side with Dale Jr. on this and not in NASCAR and not side with Denny Hamlin, considering Denny Hamlin is very unpopular. It would be a very strategic move for NASCAR in this suit. But getting back to this, I personally think that the judge should say, okay, you don't get to win your preliminary injunction, but you can't sell those charters on NASCAR's front because let's say NASCAR is granted the opportunity to sell those charters going into next year. There is a possibility, like I mentioned, that 25 Racing and Front Row Motorsports could shut down at the end of this season if they lose their charters. I mentioned the fact that Tyler Reddick has already sent a breach of contract thing to 27 Racing currently at the moment right now. And if you do have that situation, all 6 drivers could potentially leave the program, even Corey Heim as well. Bubba Wallace could walk. Tyler Reddick could walk. Riley Herbst could walk. Noah Gragson can walk, Todd Gillen can walk, and Zane Smith all could walk at the end of these seasons. And they may be looking for new rides going into the year. It would definitely be irreparable harm if they have to lose their charters. Now, if, let's say, 25 Front Row win the lawsuit, do they get their charters back from the organizations that get purchased these charters, or do they get screwed out of luck and be put in a bad position? Because that would be something they kind of watch for in regards to that side of things when it comes to the lawsuit there. I think there's a lot of questions now about the future of 27 and Front Row at this point and where those drivers could end up. Tyler Reddick, I think, will find a ride for next year without question. Reddick's been really, really solid the last couple of years. Teams will move mountains to get Tyler Reddick to be part of their program. That could mean a guy like Alex Bowman's future could be in question. Hendrick Motorsports potentially. If you could have Reddick versus Bowman, I take Reddick in a heartbeat for sure. Trackhouse could try to get him, but they've got all their drivers set for next year, so nothing's going to change there. You got other drivers, teams out there like Spire who could absolutely move a guy like Justin Haley out and put Tyler Reddick in. I think that would be interesting for sure. Bubba also probably get picked up a team. He could go to Legacy Motor Club potentially and be over there and probably be really, really competitive too. The other drivers, I don't know at this point right now. It's very interesting to see how the judge is going to rule on this case going forward, but it's really crazy that there's actually a realistic possibility right now that 25 Racing could actually, in fact, shut their program down at the end of this year if they don't get to keep their charters. Even if they win the lawsuit, maybe NASCAR will not grant those charters back, which would be very, very detriment, and it would actually be something that could be irreparable harm to those teams and organizations. So we'll see what happens in the future with this side of the lawsuit going forward, but I think it'll be very interesting to watch what happens going forward as time progresses and goes on. And I think it's kind of concerning for those teams also at the moment as well. So, that is going to today's Long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What thoughts about the actual possibility of 25 Front Row shutting down if they lose their charters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about potential candidates for the Kaulig truck team going forward in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today, we'll have NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for this weekend at Portland. If any major news breaks us live on the channel today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Cup race picks for the Southern 500. And we also, of course, will have some other content dropping as well on the channel. We got content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Ertz, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Kyle Larson, Chase Lay, Ryan Preece, Frankie Muniz, Casey Mears, Clay Savard, Dodge, Ram, Cam Waters, Jack Perkins, Will Brown, all the good stuff to talk about on the channel in the coming days and coming months as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.